In 2005, a cartoon baby ran through a shopping mall screaming that he had just escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement. 12 years later, 8 grown men accused Kevin Spacey of exactly what that joke was hinting at. The writers of Family Guy swore they had no idea. Nobody has ever fully explained how they picked that name. That is one secret. There are dozens more. A cancelled episode where Stewie was supposed to come out. A fan theory that the entire show is a hallucination inside the head of a grieving father. An episode where the writers casually revealed, in canon, that the entire Family Guy universe exists inside the molecules of a lampshade in the bedroom of 2 real actors. A creator who almost died on one of the 9/11 planes and lived because he had a hangover. Over the next 2 hours, every weird, buried, disturbing, accidental piece of Family Guy history pulled apart one by one. Welcome back to Red Umbrella. Let us begin. The hangover that saved Family Guy. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, Seth MacFarlane was supposed to die. He had a ticket. He had a seat number. He had checked in. He was booked on American Airlines Flight 11, a plane scheduled to fly from Boston to Los Angeles. Coach class, early morning departure. Nothing unusual about any of it on paper. MacFarlane was 27 years old. He had one cartoon on television that had already been canceled once and was about to be canceled again, and he was flying home after giving a lecture the night before at his old art school in Rhode Island. Flight 11 was the plane that hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m. Every person on board died. The hijackers took control of the cockpit roughly 15 minutes after takeoff. Anyone sitting in coach on that plane spent the final moments of their life in complete confusion and terror. Seth MacFarlane was not on that plane. He missed it by about 10 minutes. And the reason he missed it is the reason every single thing you are about to hear in the next 2 hours exists at all. The night before, MacFarlane had gone up to Rhode Island to give a talk at the Rhode Island School of Design, the art school where he graduated 6 years earlier. The talk went well. Afterwards, some of the faculty invited him out for drinks. MacFarlane, in his own words, had a few too many pints. He went to bed later than he should have. He woke up hungover. Then the second thing happened. His travel agent had written down the wrong departure time. The agent had him down for an 8:15 a.m. departure. The actual departure time was 7:45 a.m. So MacFarlane, already running slow from the hangover, was now working off a time that was 30 minutes too late. He thought he had a cushion. He did not have a cushion. He was already late before he left the house. He got to Logan International Airport. He walked up to the counter. He told the woman behind the desk that he was booked on Flight 11. The woman told him the gate had just closed. 10 minutes. That was the gap. 10 minutes between MacFarlane getting to the counter and the plane rolling away from the gate. He shrugged. He booked the next flight out. He wandered into the lounge. He was still hungover. He sat down in a chair. He fell asleep. About 45 minutes later, he woke up to noise. People shouting. People pointing at the TV. He looked up at the screen and watched the second plane hit the South Tower. Then the news cut back to the first crash, and they announced the flight number. He turned to the guy sitting next to him and said, "My God, that was the flight I was supposed to be on. I missed it." He later told this story on CNN. He said it plainly, without any drama. He said he was not some kind of hero. He said he got lucky because he got drunk. That was the only reason. Here is the part of the story most people do not know. MacFarlane was not the only famous person who was supposed to be on that plane. Mark Wahlberg, the actor, was also booked on Flight 11. At the very last minute, Wahlberg got invited to the Toronto Film Festival and changed his plans. He chartered a private plane to Toronto instead. Years later, Wahlberg would say something pretty dumb about it. He suggested that if he had actually been on the plane, things would not have gone down the way they did. He implied he could have stopped the hijackers single-handedly. He apologized for the statement later. It did not go over well. MacFarlane never said anything like that. MacFarlane said he was hungover and lucky. End of story. But the story does not end there. Not for us, not for this video. Because of where Family Guy was in the fall of 2001. Family Guy had premiered in January 1999, right after the Super Bowl. The ratings were decent for a little while. Then the show got moved around the schedule. Fox did not know what to do with it. By May 2000, after the second season, Fox canceled it. Then they uncanceled it. Then they brought it back for a shortened third season. Then they canceled it again. By the fall of 2001, Family Guy was basically dead. The final cancellation would be made official in 2002. The show was finished. Gone. A failed experiment. If MacFarlane had been on that plane, Family Guy would have died with him. Not just in the sense that he voiced Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Quagmire. He was the show. He was the creator. He was the writer. He was the producer. He was the guy fighting the network to keep it alive. If he dies on September 11th, the cancellation in 2002 sticks. There is no campaign to bring it back. There is no Adult Swim reruns that turn the show into a cult hit. There are no DVD sales that prove to Fox the show has a real audience. Think about that for a second. Family Guy came back from the dead in 2005. Fox brought it back because the DVDs of the first 3 seasons sold millions of copies. People who had never watched watched it on Fox, discovered it on Cartoon Network late at night, and got obsessed with it. The DVD box set became the best-selling TV DVD of the year. That is the only reason Family Guy exists as the giant it became. That comeback is the most successful comeback in the history of American television. No other show has ever been canceled, dead, and then brought back to become a permanent fixture like that. None of that happens if the guy who made the show is dead. And it goes further than just Family Guy. MacFarlane went on to create American Dad, which premiered in 2005 and is still running 20 years later. He created The Cleveland Show. He wrote, directed, and starred in the Ted movies, which were enormous hits. He made the TV show The Orville. He hosted the Oscars in 2013. He put out multiple albums of old-fashioned big band music. All of that traces back to him missing a flight because he had too much to drink. And the ripple keeps going. No Family Guy means no Seth Green career boost from voicing Chris. No Mila Kunis career boost from voicing Meg at 15. No crossover with The Simpsons in 2014. No Family Guy video games. No Peter Griffin in Fortnite. No Stewie on 1 million t-shirts in shopping malls. No giggity entering the English language as a word that people actually use. And there is one more piece to this that is almost too weird to believe. In the years since, Family Guy has made plenty of jokes about 9/11. It has made jokes about the Twin Towers, about airport security, about Osama bin Laden. There is a full episode called Back to the Pilot, which we will get to later, where Stewie and Brian go back in time, and Brian tries to stop 9/11 from happening, and it creates a second American Civil War. 17 million dead. The world falls apart, and at the end of the episode, Brian and Stewie have to let 9/11 happen again to save the timeline. They high-five when the planes hit the towers. The man who wrote that joke was supposed to be on one of those planes. Go back and watch that episode. Watch it knowing what you know now. It is one of the strangest moments in the history of television comedy. A man who missed death by 10 minutes, writing a joke about the thing that almost killed him, voicing both characters in the scene, laughing at his own near miss. The show never acknowledges this directly. It never brings it up. MacFarlane has never said that is why he wrote that episode. But the episode exists, and the man who wrote it almost died that morning. There is a version of this video where we just talk about the hangover. There is a version where we just list the coincidences and move on. But the thing worth sitting with for a minute is the idea that everything we are about to talk about in the next 2 hours only exists because one guy drank too many pints the night before a flight. Every joke, every theory, every character, every banned episode, every lawsuit, every canceled script, every running gag, all of it is downstream of a hangover. Steve Callahan, one of the main writers and producers on Family Guy, has been with the show almost from the start. He has written some of the most famous episodes, including the one where Brian dies. Alex Borstein, the voice of Lois, has been there since the first episode. Mike Henry, who voiced Herbert and Cleveland and Consuela, started as a writer and became a main cast member. Seth Green has voiced Chris since 1999. None of those people have the jobs they have now if MacFarlane dies on September 11th. That entire world of work, that entire group of careers, that entire community of writers and voice actors, all of it traces back to one guy missing a plane. And the travel agent. Nobody ever talks about the travel agent. Some person whose name we do not know, whose career we do not know, whose life we do not know, wrote down the wrong time on a piece of paper. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they clicked the wrong box on a computer. Maybe they had a fight with their husband that morning. Whatever the reason, they typed in 8:15 instead of 7:45. And because of that one small mistake, Seth MacFarlane arrived 10 minutes late instead of 40 minutes early. He stood at the counter instead of sitting in seat 3C. He booked a later flight instead of stepping onto a plane that would become a weapon. Every cutaway gag you have ever laughed at, every Stewie one-liner, every Peter Griffin fall down the stairs bit, every Quagmire giggity, every Brian monologue about being a failed novelist, every chicken fight, every Road 2 episode, every holiday special, every parody, every celebrity reference, every song number, every baby trying to kill his mother joke, all of it exists because one travel agent typed one wrong number on one morning in early September of 2001. That is the foundation. That is the bedrock. That is what you have to understand before we can talk about anything else. MacFarlane himself has talked about this exactly once at any real length. In the CNN interview, he said something small but sharp. He said that after the attacks, he felt guilty for a long time. Not because he had done anything wrong, but because so many people had died that morning, and he had not. And the reason he had not was completely stupid. He had gotten drunk. That was it. That was the whole reason. He was alive because he had partied too hard the night before. People who had their lives together, people who were were responsible, people who were organized, people who had done nothing wrong, had boarded that plane on time and were gone. And he was here, alive, because of a bad decision and a typo. That kind of guilt changes you. And a lot of the darkness in Family Guy, the willingness to make jokes about things you are not supposed to make jokes about, the refusal to treat anything as off limits, the total lack of respect for tragedy, could maybe be traced back to this. A man who survived by accident and knew it. A man who understood, at a level most comedy writers do not, that everything is random, everything is luck, everything is a coin flip, and the coin does not care about you, and the only honest response to that is to laugh. But all of that is just framing. All of that is just the foundation. What we are really here to talk about is what McFarlane built on top of that foundation once he had his second chance. And not just him, the writers he hired, the actors he cast, the jokes that almost got the show killed, the jokes that did get the show killed twice, the theories fans have built around the show that are so dark, so specific, so weirdly convincing that even after 26 years, people cannot stop arguing about what Family Guy actually is. Because before Seth MacFarlane was the guy who made Family Guy, he was a college kid in Rhode Island making a cartoon for his senior project. A cartoon about a dumb guy named Larry and his smart dog named Steve. That cartoon got him hired. That cartoon became the blueprint for everything that came later. And the fact that this cartoon exists at all, the fact that you can still watch it online right now, means that the entire Family Guy universe has a prototype sitting on the shelf that almost nobody has ever seen. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And the weirdest part? That cartoon was shown on a kids network, on Cartoon Network, in the middle of the afternoon. Proto-Family Guy aired between Dexter's Laboratory and Johnny Bravo, and parents let their children watch it. Let us see what was on that tape. Section 2. Before Peter, there was Larry. In 1995, a 21-year-old college senior named Seth MacFarlane sat down to work on his final school project. He was studying at the Rhode Island School of Design, a well-known art school in Providence. The final project was a short animated film. Every senior had to make one. It was the biggest assignment of the entire 4 years. MacFarlane had been drawing cartoons since he was a little kid. His mother used to save every scrap of paper he doodled on. By the time he was 9 years old, he was already getting paid small amounts of money to draw a weekly comic strip for a local newspaper in Connecticut. Animation was basically the only thing he had ever wanted to do. He made a short cartoon called The Life of Larry. The cartoon was about 10 minutes long. It starred a fat, stupid, middle-aged man named Larry Cummings. Larry had a talking dog named Steve. Larry had a wife named Lois. Larry had a teenage son named Milt. Larry lived in a boring suburb and did boring things and had boring thoughts. And the cartoon followed him through his boring life while his talking dog made sarcastic comments at him. If any of that sounds familiar, it should. Larry is Peter Griffin. Steve is Brian. Lois is Lois. Milt is Chris. This is not a theory. This is not a rumor. This is not some online fan going through old tapes trying to find connections. Seth MacFarlane has said this himself in interviews going back 20 years. The Life of Larry was the first version of Family Guy. The characters were redesigned and renamed later, but the DNA was all there in 1995, drawn in MacFarlane's kitchen at his parents' house in Kent, Connecticut for a school grade. The cartoon itself is strange to watch now. MacFarlane voices almost every character. The animation is rough and cheap. Larry looks a little different from Peter, but only a little. He is fatter, older, more tired looking. His voice, though, is almost exactly Peter Griffin's voice. The same wheeze, the same dumb lilt, the same way of drawing out certain words. MacFarlane has admitted in interviews that he based Peter's voice on a security guard he used to hear talking around the Rhode Island School of Design campus. He would hear this guy chatting with people and think the voice was the funniest thing he had ever heard in his life, so he stole it. He gave it to Larry first, and then later to Peter. Steve the dog has the same voice as Brian. Same upper crust, fake intellectual cadence. Same dry delivery. The character is clearly doing what Brian would later do full-time, play the straight man to his owner's stupidity. The cartoon also has a few weird details that only make sense looking back now. Inside Larry's house, there is a man named Stewie's Furniture Store. The name Stewie is already in MacFarlane's head in 1995, 4 years before the baby would be invented. There is also a brief scene with an airline pilot character who looks like an early version of Quagmire and talks like an early version of Quagmire. Quagmire would not officially exist for another 4 years either. The cartoon does another thing that is important to understand. It has cutaway gags. The main story pauses, and then the camera jumps to a short, unrelated unrelated joke, and then jumps back to the main story. This is the single most recognizable thing about Family Guy. The entire comic identity of the show is built on cutaways, and they are already there in the life of Larry. The first version of the format already exists. The student film is basically a 20-minute episode of Family Guy with different character names. McFarlane turned the cartoon in. His professor at Rhode Island School of Design liked it so much that he did something most professors would never do. He took the student's project and sent it to a real animation studio. That studio was Hanna-Barbera, the company that had made the Flintstones and Scooby-Doo and 1,000 other famous cartoons. Hanna-Barbera watched the life of Larry, and within about a year, they offered McFarlane a job. He was 22 years old. He had just graduated, and he was now working at one of the biggest cartoon studios in the country. His first job there was animating for a cartoon called Johnny Bravo, the one about the muscle guy with the Elvis hair who hits on women and gets rejected. McFarlane worked on a few other cartoons for Hanna-Barbera too, including one called Cow and Chicken, and another called Dexter's Laboratory. Anyone who watched Cartoon Network in the late 1990s would know all three shows. But while he was working on those other people's cartoons, he got an opportunity. Cartoon Network had a program at the time called What a Cartoon. The idea was simple. They would give new animators a small budget and a 7-minute slot on the channel to make any cartoon they wanted. It was like a talent scout system. If the short was popular, it could become a real show. That is how Dexter's Laboratory started. That is how Johnny Bravo started. That is how the Powerpuff Girls started. The short comes first, and if people love it, the network orders more. McFarlane was given a slot, and what he made was called Larry and Steve. This one is important, because Larry and Steve, a follow-up to his student film, actually aired on Cartoon Network in December of 1997. Which means a short cartoon starring a prototype version of Peter Griffin and a prototype version of Brian Griffin aired on Cartoon Network in between episodes of Dexter's Laboratory and the Powerpuff Girls. Parents let their kids watch Larry and Steve. Little kids laughed at Larry and Steve. Most of them never knew they were watching the first version of Family Guy. In Larry and Steve, the cartoon starts with Steve the dog about to be put down at the animal shelter. He has 1 day left. A man named Larry walks in and adopts him at the last second. The two of them drive around town together, doing nothing in particular. Larry is dumb. Steve talks. Only Larry can hear him talk. They stop at a department store. A small boy and his father arrive in a plane, and the plane crashes into the store. There is some chaos. It ends. The whole thing runs about 7 minutes. This version of Larry is slightly different. This version is less vulgar. The cartoon was made for kids, so the jokes are softer. Larry does not curse. There are no adult references, but the character is still Peter. The design is cleaner, but the personality is the same. Dumb, sweet, simple-minded, cheerfully wrong about everything. And Steve is still Brian. Same voice, same dry responses. The two of them are a comedy team, and the comedy team works. Larry and Steve aired on Cartoon Network and got noticed. It got noticed by people at Fox specifically. Fox at the time was looking for new animated shows. They already had The Simpsons, and King of the Hill had started in 1997 and become a hit. They wanted more. Someone at Fox saw Larry and Steve, liked it, and reached out to McFarlane. They asked him if he could turn Larry into a full television series. He said yes. But Fox did not want Larry. Fox wanted something new. The deal was this: take the characters you love, take the format that works, and build a bigger version of it. Give the guy a daughter. Give him a wife who is not a bystander. Give him a baby. Give him neighbors. Build a whole town. Fox gave McFarlane a budget of $50,000 and told him to make a 15-minute sample episode. That was his shot. 15 minutes, 50 grand. Make it work. McFarlane has talked about what happened next in an interview with the New York Times. He said he spent about 6 months with no sleep and no life, just drawing like crazy in my kitchen and doing this pilot. 6 months. One guy, drawing every single frame in his kitchen. This is worth sitting with. The pilot of Family Guy, the 15-minute sample that would eventually turn into a show that would run for over 25 years, that would make its creator a billionaire, that would be quoted and memed and tattooed onto people's bodies, was drawn by one dude with no sleep in his kitchen for $50,000. During those 6 months, Larry became Peter, Steve became Brian, Lois stayed Lois, Milt became Chris, and McFarlane added the new characters Fox had asked for: Meg, the teenage daughter; Stewie, the baby; Quagmire, the pervert neighbor. The town of Quahog, Rhode Island, named after a type of clam that lives in the waters near Providence. The Drunken Clam, the bar where Peter and his friends drink. All of this was invented in one kitchen by one exhausted young man in 1998. The pilot was finished. Fox watched it. They loved it. They ordered 13 episodes and offered McFarlane a contract for $2 million a year. year. He was 24 years old. Family Guy premiered on January 31st, 1999, right after the Super Bowl. That is the biggest possible slot on American television. Tens of millions of people are watching because of the football game. Fox put Family Guy in that slot because they wanted to make sure as many people saw it as possible. It was a vote of confidence. They believed in the show. The first episode was called Death Has a Shadow, and it introduced the whole family to the world. And here is the twist that you do not usually hear in the official story. Larry never went away. In season 21 of Family Guy, which aired in 2022, there is an episode called Happy Halloween. In that episode, a villain is defeated, and the villain briefly morphs through several famous cartoon characters as he dies. One of those characters is Homer Simpson, another is Fred Flintstone, and the third is Larry, the actual Larry, from The Life of Larry, the 1995 student film character. Seth MacFarlane brought Larry back for one single frame 27 years later as a private joke that basically nobody in the audience would get. Most viewers saw a fat, bald guy and did not think twice about him, but he was the original. Larry had been brought home. There is one more thing that makes the Larry story weirder. A lot of jokes from the original 1995 student film were reused in early episodes of Family Guy. The cutaway gag about how in England people have drive-by arguments instead of drive-by shootings, that is in The Life of Larry first. It shows up again in the Family Guy episode, There's Something About Polly. The joke about Larry seeing the city of Philadelphia for the first time, that moved into the pilot of Family Guy, Death Has a Shadow. The joke about Larry farting for the first time at age 30 also moved to the pilot. The joke about God being embarrassed by the priest talking about how he treated Job in the Bible also moved to the pilot. MacFarlane basically recycled his student film into his pilot. He did not have time to come up with new jokes. He had 6 months and no sleep and a kitchen table, so he took the best bits from the cartoon he had already made and dropped them into the new one. Which means a lot of the opening moments of Family Guy, the moments most fans remember as the start of the show, are actually moments that had already existed for 4 years in a student film that nobody watched. From a college senior who was about to get the biggest break of his life. The Life of Larry is still available to watch. It is out there. Somewhere on the internet right now, the entire student film is uploaded for free, and most Family Guy fans have never seen it. The cartoon that started the whole empire is basically forgotten. So is Larry and Steve. Most people who watched it as kids have no memory of it. It aired once, maybe a couple of times in reruns, and then disappeared into the Cartoon Network archives. A generation of kids watched the prototype of Family Guy without knowing what it was. Their parents let them watch it because it looked like a normal kids cartoon. The dog talks, the guy is silly, the jokes are gentle. Nobody in the room had any idea they were watching the first draft of a show that would one day be banned in multiple countries, sued by a music publishing company, pulled from American television for having an abortion storyline, and nearly canceled 3 separate times for being too offensive. The softest, sweetest version of Family Guy aired on Cartoon Network for kids. The real version was waiting. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And when the real version showed up, it had a voice cast that had nothing to do with the one fans would come to know. Lois was not originally played by the woman who plays her now. Meg was not originally played by Mila Kunis. There was a completely different actress in that first season, and what happened to her, why she left, and the way the show has been making jokes about her absence for 25 years is one of the strangest stories in the history of voice acting. Section 3. The 3 voices of Meg Griffin. Meg Griffin has been played by 3 different actresses. Most fans only know about one of them. The story of how that happened and what the show has been doing with that story for the last 25 years is one of the weirdest ongoing jokes in animation history. The first voice of Meg Griffin belonged to Rachel MacFarlane. She is Seth MacFarlane's younger sister. She is also a professional voice actress in her own right. She has done voices on dozens of cartoons, including American Dad, where she voices Haley Smith. But before any of that, before Family Guy was even a real show, she voiced Meg in the original pitch reel her brother made to sell the show to Fox. The pitch reel was a short version of the pilot. Seth MacFarlane had to show Fox executives what the show would look like, so he made a sample, and he needed voices for the characters. He did Peter himself, he did Brian himself, he did Stewie himself. He pulled in his friends and family for the other parts. His sister Rachel read Meg's lines. She was not paid much. It was a favor. Fox loved the pitch. They ordered the show, and then Rachel MacFarlane did not get the role. The network wanted a bigger name for the actual series. Rachel was fine with this. She went on to have a long career in voice acting, but for a few weeks in 1998, Meg Griffin had her voice. That first version of Meg still exists on old tapes and early promotional material. The second voice of Meg Griffin belonged to Cree Summer. Cree Summer is a legend in the voice acting world. She has voiced Susie Carmichael on Rugrats, Number 5 on Codename Kids Next Door, Foxy Love on Drawn Together, and about 100 other characters across dozens of shows. In 1998, when Family Guy was casting its first season, Cree Summer was offered the part of Meg. She accepted. She actually began recording. Some of her work on early scenes exists on tape, though it has never been released publicly. And then she was let go. The producers changed their minds. Cree Summer has talked about this herself in interviews. She was told, essentially, that the show was going a different direction. She did not take it personally. She moved on to other work. But for a short window in 1998, Cree Summer was the voice of Meg Griffin. She recorded real dialogue for real scenes, and then it was scrapped and replaced. The third voice of Meg Griffin belonged to Lacey Chabert. This is the one most fans do not know about at all. Lacey Chabert was already a working actress in 1998. She was 16 years old. She had been starring on a Fox drama called Party of Five since 1994. She played Claudia Salinger on that show. She had also done voice work before, playing Eliza Thornberry on a Nickelodeon cartoon called The Wild Thornberries. She was young, talented, already famous in her own right, and looking for more voice work. She auditioned for Meg. She got the part. Chabert voiced Meg for the entire first season of Family Guy. Every single first season episode, from the pilot Death Has a Shadow all the way through the final episode of that run, featured Lacey Chabert's voice. If you watch Family Guy from the beginning on any streaming service today, the first 13 episodes you hear Meg in are her. Here's the weird part. She was never credited. Her name is not in the opening credits of any of those first season episodes. She is not listed in the cast. If you looked at the show's official credits in 1999, you would think Meg was voiced by someone else or nobody at all. Chabert has said in interviews that she was never clear about why she was uncredited. There was some confusion over her contract. She was busy with school and with Party of Five. There was worry about whether voicing a character on a raunchy cartoon would clash with her wholesome image on her drama show. Whatever the reason, her name stayed off the credits for the entire first season. After season 1, Chabert left. She said in a later interview, "I actually left the show of my own accord, and only because I was in school and doing Party of Five at the time." She did not hate the show. She did not have a fight with Seth MacFarlane. She just had other work. Party of Five was still airing new episodes. She was a teenager trying to finish high school. Voicing a cartoon baby's sister was not her priority. So Family Guy had to find another Meg, and they found her in a 15-year-old actress named Mila Kunis. Mila Kunis was born in Ukraine and had moved to America as a child. She did not speak much English when she arrived. By age 9, she was modeling and acting. By age 14, she had lied about her age to land the role of Jackie Burkhart on That 70s Show, which premiered in 1998. By 1999, when she auditioned for Meg, she was already a working television actress, though she was still a minor. She had to be brought in with her mother for legal reasons. Kunis has talked about her audition in interviews. She says she was given the lines to read and did not fully understand what the character was supposed to be. Seth MacFarlane, who was running the audition, kept stopping her and telling her to slow down, to enunciate more, to speak more clearly. She was not sure what he wanted. She kept trying. Eventually, she read a line where Meg calls Peter an idiot, and the way she said it made MacFarlane stop. He has said in interviews that in that one moment, he heard exactly the tone he had been searching for. She got the part. Kunis has voiced Meg Griffin ever since. Over 25 years, through every single season, through every single episode where Meg appears, through every single cruel joke the Griffin family has made at Meg's expense, through every single moment of pain Meg has been put through. Mila Kunis is Meg Griffin now. The voice is so attached to the character that most people who watch the show have no idea anyone else ever played her, which is where the show gets weird about it. Because Seth MacFarlane and his writers decided that Lacey Chabert leaving the show was too good a piece of history to let go. They started making jokes about it inside the show, as part of the show's own canon, for 25 years. In season 8, episode 9, Business Guy, Peter takes over Lois's father's company and threatens to replace Lois as his wife if she does not behave. He snarls at her, "Does the name Lacey Chabert mean anything to you?" Lois immediately looks terrified and agrees to behave. The threat Peter is making is that he will recast his wife the same way the show recast Meg. Lois understands the reference. The joke lives in the universe of the show, which means inside Family Guy's canon, there is awareness that people get replaced, that characters can be swapped out and written over, that the person playing you is not guaranteed to play you forever. In season 10, episode 5, Back to the Pilot, Brian and Stewie travel back in time to the first episode of the show. They watch themselves in the past. Meg shows up. Her voice sounds different. It sounds like Lacey Chabert, because it is Lacey Chabert. The show used her actual archived audio from the original 1999 recordings. Stewie reacts to Meg's voice and says, "She sounds like someone about to give up a huge opportunity." That is a direct reference to Chabert quitting the show after the first season and going off to do other projects. The show is admitting out loud in its own dialogue that the original actress left and that this was a mistake on her part. In season 11, episode 4, Yug Ilimaf, Stewie reverses time. Everything in the Griffin family's life starts going backwards. One of the signs the family realizes something is wrong is that Meg's voice slowly reverts. It changes from Mila Kunis back to Lacey Chabert, meaning that time has flowed backwards so far that Meg is now being voiced by the original actress again. The visual gag is that the characters themselves recognize whose voice is whose. They know Meg used to sound different. Time travel has brought the old voice back. In season 17, episode 10, Griffin Winter Games, Meg goes to the Winter Olympics to compete in skiing. During the race, she looks over and sees another skier next to her. It is Lacey Chabert, playing herself. The real Lacey Chabert, now in her 30s, appearing in the cartoon universe as a competing skier. The two Megs look at each other. Lacey Chabert says to Meg, "This should be my Olympics." They yell at each other. Peter, watching in the crowd, yells, "Shut up, Meg." Except this time, he is yelling it at both of them at once. This is the only time in the entire history of the show that both voices of Meg appear in the same scene. Lacey Chabert got paid for that cameo. 25 years after she left the show, Family Guy brought her back for one episode to yell at herself through her own replacement. The joke is that both versions of Meg exist in the Family Guy universe. They are aware of each other, they resent each other, they are the same character played by two different actresses, and they both know it. There is a layer to all of this that goes beyond the jokes. It goes into how Meg is written. In the first season, when Lacey Chabert voiced her, Meg was a normal teenage girl. She was whiny sometimes. She was embarrassed by her family. She had normal teenage problems. But her family did not treat her badly. Peter was not cruel to her. Lois actually cared about her. The family's reactions to Meg were close to how any normal sitcom would handle a teenage daughter. When Mila Kunis took over, something shifted. Slowly at first, then faster, then full speed. Meg became the family's punching bag. Peter started insulting her to her face. Lois started ignoring her. Chris and Stewie started treating her like she was not even part of the family. By the time the show returned from its cancellation in 2005, Meg was the most hated member of her own household. Not by accident, on purpose. The writers made the choice to turn her into the family joke. Seth MacFarlane has been asked about this many times. He has said in various interviews that early on, the writers did not know what to do with Meg. She was not as fun to write as the other characters. Peter was a cartoon dad. Stewie was a cartoon baby. Brian was the voice of reason. Chris was a simple himbo. But Meg was just a teenage girl. And the writers did not know how to make her funny. So they gave her a new job. Her job became getting hurt. Her job became taking the abuse the rest of the family dished out. Her job became the punchline. There is a deeper truth to this that MacFarlane has never said out loud, but that many fans have noticed. The shift in Meg's treatment lines up almost exactly with the voice change. While Lacey Chabert played her, Meg was treated like a human being. Once Mila Kunis took over, Meg was treated like a dog. Something about having a new voice made the writers comfortable turning on the character. Chabert was a known child actress from a prestige drama. There was some protective instinct around her. Kunis was younger, newer, less famous, and willing to do whatever they wrote. So they wrote worse and worse things for her to say about her own character. This is how Meg ended up being stuffed in a trash can by her own dad. This is how Meg ended up being told by her own mother that she was the ugliest person in Quahog. This is how Meg ended up being farted on by Peter for an entire minute with no punchline. This is how Meg ended up being locked out of her own house for an entire summer without anyone noticing. All of those jokes happen after the voice change. None of them happened before. There is one more strange piece to the Meg story. In season 8, episode 21, the banned episode called Partial Terms of Endearment, which is never aired on American television, Meg's role is small. She barely appears. The episode is about Lois becoming pregnant with another couple's baby. But in the original scripts for that episode, and for several other banned or canceled storylines, Meg was going to be the focus. One canceled episode pitched in the writer's room would have had Meg being assaulted while in juvenile detention, and then having to decide what to do about the pregnancy. The network refused to let them make it. Seth MacFarlane confirmed this at Comic-Con in 2009. He said Fox would probably decline to air it. That episode never got past the pitch stage, but it existed. Somewhere in the Family Guy writing archive is a pitch document where the most abused character on the show is put through one of the worst storylines in cartoon history, and the network said no. The three voices of Meg Griffin: Rachel McFarlane, who was a favor; Cree Summer, who was almost; Lacey Chabert, who was uncredited; Mila Kunis, who became the character, and a cartoon that has spent 25 years making jokes about its own casting history, baking the real story of its own production into its own canon, treating the real world and the fake world as if they are the same thing. Meg is the heart of the show's meta-humor. She is the character most aware, in a weird, buried way, that Family Guy is just a cartoon, and she is also the character the show treats the worst. Those two facts are probably connected. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What is stranger is that Meg is not the only character whose story breaks the fourth wall. Another character on the show, a baby, was supposed to come out as gay in a script that was written, approved, and scheduled to air before the show got canceled. The episode has a name. It was given a production code. It was finished at the writing stage, and it sat in a drawer for 16 years before any piece of it ever saw the light of day. Section 4. Stewie was supposed to come out in Season 3. There is a Family Guy episode that was written, approved, given a title, given a production code, and scheduled to air. The script made it all the way through the writer's room. It went through rewrites. It was on the production calendar, and then the show got canceled, and the episode was never made. The episode was called Queer is Stewie, and it would have been the moment, 16 years before the show actually got around to it, where Stewie Griffin came out of the closet. The story of this canceled episode, and what it reveals about the most confusing character on the show, is probably the deepest buried secret in the entire Family Guy production history. Most fans have never heard of it. Seth MacFarlane only talked about it publicly once in a magazine interview in 2009, and even then, he talked about it in a way that made it sound like a curiosity rather than what it actually was, which was a completed creative decision that got erased by a cancellation. Start with the character. Stewie Griffin was introduced in the pilot of Family Guy in January 1999 as a supervillain baby. That was the whole joke. A 1-year-old infant with the voice of a British stage actor, the vocabulary of a college professor, the intelligence of an evil scientist, and a burning hatred for his own mother. He wanted to kill Lois. He wanted to take over the world. He had laser weapons. He built mind control devices. He had a teddy bear named Rupert, who he talked to like a best friend. He was an evil genius, trapped in the body of a baby. And the comedy came from the gap between what he thought he was capable of and what he actually was. That version of Stewie lasted about 2 seasons. Seth MacFarlane has said in interviews that by the middle of season 2, the writers were running out of things to do with the matricide joke. There were only so many ways Stewie could try to kill his mother before the bit got boring. So the writers started looking for other things to do with him. They started playing with his sexuality. At first it was small. A throwaway gag here, an odd line there. Stewie would say something that sounded a little too interested in a male character. He would react to another baby boy in a way that seemed more than friendly. He would comment on men's fashion. He would do musical theater references. The jokes built up slowly. Seth MacFarlane told Playboy magazine in 2009 what was actually happening behind the scenes during this period. He said, "We all feel that Stewie is almost certainly gay, and he's in the process of figuring it out for himself. We haven't ever really locked into it because we get a lot of good jokes from both sides, but we treat him oftentimes as if we were writing a gay character." So the writers, quietly, without announcing it, had already decided Stewie was gay. They were writing him that way. They just had not said it out loud in the show itself. And in the 3rd season, they decided it was time. The plan was to end season 3 with an episode where Stewie came out. MacFarlane described the plot in that same Playboy interview. He said, "We had an episode that went all the way to the script phase in which Stewie does come out. It had to do with the harassment he took from other kids at school. He ends up going back in time to prevent a passage in Leviticus from being written. That passage is a specific line in the book of Leviticus in the Old Testament that is often used as a religious argument against homosexuality. In the canceled episode, Stewie gets bullied so badly for being different that he builds his time machine and travels back thousands of years to ancient times and tries to stop the writer of Leviticus from putting that line in the book at all. The episode had a title, Queer is Stewie. That was the working name. It had a place in the season. It was being prepared for air. Then Fox canceled the show. In May 2002, after the 3rd season wrapped, Fox announced that Family Guy would not continue. The ratings had been fine, but not spectacular. The show had been moved around the schedule multiple times. Fox executives felt the show was too controversial and too expensive to keep fighting for, so they pulled the plug. Queer is Stewie was one of the casualties. The script existed, the story was approved, the character arc was planned, and then the show went away, and the episode went into a drawer. When the show came back in 2005, thanks to DVD sales and Adult Swim reruns, Queer as Stewie did not come with it. The story had been designed for the specific moment of season 3. Bringing it back later would have meant rewriting everything around it. The show moved on, which put the writers in a strange position. They had already decided, privately, that Stewie was gay. They had written him that way for years. The coming out episode was ready to go, and now the coming out episode was gone, but the character was still there, and the character was still gay in the way the writers had been writing him. So they kept going. They kept writing him that way. They just stopped planning to make it official. For the next 16 years of the show, Stewie Griffin was written as a gay character without the show ever confirming it on screen. The hints piled up. They stopped being hints at some point and became text. Just text the show refused to acknowledge. In the episode Chick Cancer, during the closing credits, Stewie admitted that he could totally get into being gay. In Not All Dogs Go to Heaven, a character asks if he is queer, and Stewie answers, probably. In Three Kings, Stewie plays the role of a villain from the Stephen King novel Misery and shows sexual attraction to Brian. In Screwed the Pooch, he mentions that he likes to go to disco-themed gay bars to relax. In Family Gay, Brian finds a folder Stewie has been keeping on a straight camp, a place where gay people get sent to become straight. And when Brian notices the folder is from last year, Stewie looks uncomfortable and says it was just something he found in the street. In Patriot Games, he becomes visibly aroused after seeing football player Tom Brady showering. In Brian and Stewie, a 2-character bottle episode where Brian and Stewie are trapped in a bank vault for 22 minutes, Stewie's cell phone screensaver is a picture of a muscular man. He carries a photo of actor Chris Noth in his wallet. He makes multiple references to wanting to have sex with Brian's adult son, Dylan. In Excellence in Broadcasting, Stewie accidentally discovers what happens when you rub yourself the right way, and his fantasy during the moment is being tied to his crib while a muscular Brian and his teddy bear Rupert kiss in front of him. None of this is subtle. None of it is buried. All of it is in the show, in actual episodes that aired on Fox to millions of viewers over a span of more than a decade. The show was written by a room of writers who had all agreed, privately, that their baby character was gay. They just never made it official. MacFarlane has explained this reasoning in multiple interviews. He said the ambiguity gave them more jokes to work with. If Stewie was officially gay, the writers could only do gay jokes. If Stewie was officially straight, they could only do straight jokes. By keeping it unclear, they could do both. They could flip it based on what was funny that week. In some episodes, Stewie has romantic feelings for female babies. In Dammit Janet, he falls in love with a girl named Janet at daycare. The writers kept the door open on both sides, so they never had to close either one. But the writers also had a second reason, and this one is more complicated. MacFarlane told Playboy, ultimately, Stewie will be gay, or a very unhappy, repressed heterosexual. It also explains why he's so hell-bent on killing Lois and taking over the world. He has a lot of aggression, which comes from confusion and uncertainty about his orientation. What MacFarlane was saying, in plain terms, was that Stewie's entire villain act might be a cover. All the evil plans, all the matricide, all the world domination, all the attempts to kill his mother. The whole reason the character existed in the first place might have been, in the writer's private understanding of him, a cover for something else. A 1-year-old who did not know how to deal with feelings he was too young to understand, who was acting out in the biggest possible way because he had no other way to express what was going on inside him. This reading changes how you watch the show. Stewie trying to kill Lois stops being funny in a cartoon way and starts being sad in a real way. A baby who hates his mother because he does not know how to be himself around her. A baby who wants to control everything because he cannot control the one thing about himself that matters. A baby who is angry at the world because the world has not given him the language for what he is yet. MacFarlane has pulled back from this reading in some later interviews. He has said that Stewie is a cartoon character and that cartoon characters do not really have sexualities. He has said the writers keep it vague because they do not want to pin the character down. But the Playboy quote is on the record and nobody has ever taken it back. 16 years after Queer as Stewie was killed, in March 2018, Family Guy finally addressed Stewie's sexuality in an episode called Send in Stewie, Please. It aired in season 16. It was a special episode designed as an event. It had no commercial breaks for the first time in the show's history. It had only 2 characters in it, Stewie and a therapist played by Sir Ian McKellen, the famous actor who played Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings movies. The whole episode takes place in a therapy office. Stewie has been sent there because he pushed a boy down the stairs at daycare. Over the course of the episode, McKellen's character slowly pulls Stewie apart. He points out that Stewie's British accent is fake. He is correct. Stewie is not actually British. Stewie was raised in Rhode Island by American parents. The accent is an act. Stewie tries to deny it and eventually admits the therapist is right. Then, the therapist pushes further. He starts asking Stewie why he talks the way he does, why he acts the way he acts, why he pushed the boy down the stairs. And Stewie has a long, fast breakdown of a speech where he talks about every single gay stereotype he has ever played into. He talks about how much he loves Broadway musicals. He talks about all the celebrities he has crushes on. He talks about how he cannot stop himself from reacting to attractive men. He says the line, "If anything, I'm less gay than I used to be, but do I think Grant Gustin and I would make the most adorable Instagram couple? Yes, I do." Grant Gustin is the actor who plays the Flash on television. The therapist listens to all of this, and then he says, "You seem like a very lonely little boy." And Stewie cracks. He says, "Oh my god, I am. I'm so lonely." The episode does not confirm that Stewie is gay. It stays in the same vague space the show has been in for 16 years, but it comes closer than the show ever has before. And it does something the show has almost never done. It takes Stewie seriously. It treats his sexuality not as a joke, but as a source of actual pain. For 20 minutes, the cartoon baby is a real person. At the end of the episode, Stewie goes back to the way he was. He puts the fake accent back on, he goes back home. Nothing changes. The next episode is business as usual. But for those 20 minutes, the show finally did what it had been avoiding for 16 years. It let the character be honest. It let him cry. It let him say out loud that he was lonely and did not know how to be himself. Rich Appel, one of the show's producers, explained the decision to TV Line. He said, "Stewie's awareness of his sexuality is this uncertain thing, and that needs to stay as it is. His uncertainty gives him a vulnerability, which is something we need to maintain for the series. Whether he is or not, that isn't going to be answered when he's a 1-year-old. So the official answer is still what it has always been. Stewie is ambiguous. The show does not confirm, the show does not deny. But the private answer, the one McFarlane gave in 2009 when nobody was paying attention, has been in every episode of the show since season 2. Stewie is gay. The writers know. They have known the whole time. They have been writing him that way for 26 years. The only reason the audience has to guess is because the one episode that would have made it clear got killed when Fox pulled the plug in 2002. Queer is Stewie sits in a drawer somewhere in the Family Guy production offices. A finished script. A story that was ready to go. The biggest reveal the show ever planned. Locked away. Never made. And the character it was about has spent the next quarter century walking around its absence, hinting at the thing he was supposed to say out loud, dropping one clue after another, waiting for a moment that never came. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The show had been hiding one truth in plain sight for 16 years. But somewhere on the internet, a fan was quietly writing a theory about a different truth. A theory so dark, so specific, and so weirdly convincing that it would spread across Reddit in 2014 and then explode on TikTok almost a decade later. A theory that says Family Guy is not a comedy at all. A theory that says everything you are watching, every joke, every cutaway, every character, is the inside of one man's head while he slowly loses his mind. Section 5. The Peter is going insane theory. In 2014, a Reddit user with the username bblank0308 posted a theory about Family Guy on an internet forum. The post was long. It was detailed. It had specific evidence. It laid out its argument in order. And it proposed something so dark about the show that most people who read it never watched Family Guy the same way again. The theory has a simple name. The Peter is going insane theory. It is not canon. Seth MacFarlane has never confirmed it. None of the writers have ever endorsed it. The show has never directly addressed it. Everything that follows is fan interpretation of a cartoon, not official truth about the cartoon. That needs to be said up front, because the theory is so convincing, so complete in its own internal logic, that people sometimes forget it is just a theory. It is a reading. One reading out of many possible readings. But it is the most famous fan theory in the history of the show, and it is the darkest one anyone has ever come up with. Here is what the theory says. Family Guy is not a comedy. Family Guy is the hallucination of a broken man. Every single thing you have ever watched on the show, every cutaway gag, every chicken fight, every musical number, every Stewie one-liner, every Brian monologue, every celebrity cameo is happening inside the mind of Peter Griffin as he sits in a hospital bed recovering from a total nervous breakdown. down. According to the theory, the real Peter Griffin is not a fat idiot. In the real world, Peter is a smart, sensitive, heartbroken man. He used to have a good life. He had a wife named Lois. He had 3 children. He had a dog. He had friends. He had a house on Spooner Street. All of that was real. And then one night, everything fell apart. The theory builds the details out from there. Meg and Chris, Peter's 2 older children, went to a party together. It was a normal teenage party. They were young. They were dumb. They drank more than they should have. When the party ended, they had no ride home. Meg, the older of the 2, had a car. She had been drinking. Chris had been drinking too. They got in the car anyway. Meg drove. On the way home, Meg crashed the car. Both of them died. Lois, who was pregnant at the time with a 3rd child, got the news. She did not recover from it. She sat in her house, alone with her grief, for days. She could not function. She could not eat. She could not stop thinking about her children. The guilt crushed her. At some point, Lois killed herself, and the baby she was carrying died with her. Peter, sitting alone in an empty house, lost his mind. He could not accept what had happened. He could not live in a world where his entire family had been taken from him in a single week. So his brain did what brains do when they cannot handle what is actually happening. It built a different world, a better world, a world where everyone was still alive, and that world is Family Guy. The theory says that the cartoon you have been watching for 26 years is Peter's invention. Every character in it is a version of someone he knew, redesigned by a grieving mind. Every joke in it is Peter trying to make himself laugh so he does not have to face what happened. Every episode is a day in the life of a man who cannot leave the hospital he has been living in since the night of the crash. The theory then explains the characters one by one, and this is where it becomes hard to shake. Meg. In the real world, Meg was a normal teenage girl, maybe even a pretty one, maybe even a popular one. The theory says Peter's beautiful daughter got turned into the family punching bag in the cartoon for one reason. Peter, deep down, blames her. She was the one driving the car. She was the one who decided to get behind the wheel, drunk. She killed his other child. And even though Peter loves her, his grief has twisted that love into something ugly. So in his fantasy world, Meg is the one everyone hates. Meg is the one nobody listens to. Meg gets insulted, ignored, stuffed in trash cans, forgotten. The cruelty the cartoon Meg goes through is the cruelty the real Peter secretly feels toward his real daughter for what she did. Chris. In the real world, Chris was developmentally disabled. He had not gotten enough oxygen when he was born. He was the son Peter protected, the son Peter worried about, the son Peter felt responsible for in a deeper way than the other 2. The theory says Peter cannot let himself imagine Chris as a complete person, because imagining Chris whole would remind him that Chris is dead. So the cartoon Chris is simple, cheerful, uncomplicated, a permanent child. A version of Chris that can live forever in Peter's head because he does not have to face the reality of what Chris was actually like. Stewie. This is where the theory gets really dark. In the real world, Stewie was never born. Lois was still pregnant when she died. Peter never got to meet his 3rd child. He never got to hear his voice. He never got to find out who he would become. So in the cartoon, Peter imagines his unborn son as the smartest, most capable, most remarkable human being who ever lived. A baby who builds time machines. A baby who speaks multiple languages. A baby who could take over the world if he felt like it. This is a father imagining every possible version of the child he never got to meet, giving that child everything, projecting every hope onto him. And the rage Stewie feels toward Lois, the constant attempts to kill her, is Peter's own buried rage at his wife for what she did. Peter cannot let himself hate Lois directly, so he puts the hatred inside the son she carried. The baby wants to kill the mother because deep down, some part of Peter will never forgive her. Lois. In the cartoon, Lois is a devoted wife and mother. She is patient. She puts up with Peter's nonsense. She is still there, day after day, loving him. The theory says this is the most obvious wish fulfillment in the whole show. The real Lois is gone. The cartoon Lois exists so that Peter can still come home to her. Every episode is another day where she has not left him. Every cutaway gag is another moment where he gets to hear her voice. Brian. The family dog. In the cartoon, Brian is the smartest character in the house. He reads books, he writes novels, he has opinions on politics and literature, he speaks English. The theory says Brian is Peter's own intelligence, the part of him Peter cannot access anymore because the grief has taken it. Before the accident, Peter was a smart man, a thinking man. Now, in the fantasy, he has split himself in 2. The idiot walking around making fart jokes is how Peter sees himself now, broken and useless. Brian is the ghost of who he used to be. That is why Peter Peter and Brian are best friends. That is why Brian is always at Peter's side. They are the same person. They used to be one. Quagmire and Cleveland. The theory says these two are the only characters in the whole show who are actually real. They are Peter's best friends. Glenn Quagmire and Cleveland Brown. In the real world, they are still alive. They still exist. They come to the hospital and visit Peter. They sit with him. They listen to him talk about his imaginary life. They go along with it because they love him, and they do not know how else to help. They are not part of the fantasy because Peter does not need to invent them. They are the one piece of his old life that is still there. The theory even explains Cleveland leaving the show. In 2009, Family Guy spun Cleveland off into his own series called The Cleveland Show. For several years, Cleveland barely appeared on Family Guy because he had moved to Virginia for his own show. The theory says this represents Cleveland, in the real world, needing a break. He had been visiting Peter in the hospital and indulging Peter's fantasy for too long. He was starting to get lost in it himself. He was starting to believe in Quahog. He was starting to talk to Peter about characters who did not exist. So he stepped away to get his own life back in order. And that is why the cartoon Cleveland moved to Virginia. When the Cleveland show got canceled in 2013 and Cleveland came back to Family Guy, it was because the real Cleveland had recovered enough to start visiting Peter again. Joe Swanson, the cop in the wheelchair next door. The theory says Joe is not real. Joe is a character Peter made up after Cleveland and Quagmire told him about their neighborhoods. Peter, sitting in his hospital bed, imagined what a perfect neighbor would be. A family man, a strong protector, a good husband. Everything Peter believes he failed to be. Joe is Peter's vision of who he should have been. That is why Joe is so honorable. That is why Joe's marriage to Bonnie is stable. That is why Joe's son Kevin is a soldier. Peter built Joe as the father he wishes he had been. The wheelchair is there because Peter knows, in his heart, that even this imagined better version of himself is broken. The theory also explains the show itself. It explains the structure. Family Guy is famous for its cutaway gags. A character says something, and then the show cuts to a short, unrelated joke, and then cuts back. The theory says cutaways are the theory's smoking gun. They are not a comedy format. They are the way Peter's broken mind works. His thoughts drift. He cannot stay focused on one thing. He gets triggered by a word or a memory, and suddenly his brain takes him somewhere else for a few seconds, and then it pulls him back. Every cutaway is a moment of dissociation. Every cutaway is a piece of evidence that Peter is not okay. The theory explains why nothing has consequences. Characters die and come back. Houses get destroyed and rebuilt. Giant chickens fight Peter for 20 minutes and nobody in the town notices. Stewie tries to kill Lois every week and nobody goes to the police. In any real show, these things would matter. In Family Guy, they do not. The theory says this is because Family Guy is not real. It is a dream, and dreams do not have consequences. Nothing you do in a dream hurts anyone. The world resets every episode because Peter's brain resets every episode. The fantasy has no memory. The theory explains the cruelty. Family Guy has been accused over and over of being meaner than any other cartoon on television. Characters get killed for no reason. Minor characters get murdered in throwaway jokes. A running gag involves Quagmire breaking into women's houses and filming them without their knowledge. The cruelty is constant and casual. The theory says this is because Peter is angry. He is angry at the world for taking his family. He is angry at himself for failing them. He is angry that he is still alive. So the universe of his imagination is cruel because he is cruel now. He could not be this cruel in real life. He could only be this cruel inside his own head, where nothing he imagines can actually hurt anyone. And the theory explains one specific detail that has made it impossible to forget. In the real Family Guy, Peter is fat, extremely fat, cartoonishly fat. The theory says the real Peter, sitting in the hospital, is not fat at all. The real Peter is thin. He is gaunt. He has not eaten properly in months. He is dying inside. The fat Peter in the cartoon is Peter's vision of himself as someone who is happy. Fat people, in Peter's mind, are people who eat, people who enjoy food, people who sit at tables with their families and share meals. The real Peter cannot eat anymore. Food has no taste. His family is gone. So his mind builds a version of him who eats all the time, who loves food, who has a belly big enough to rest on a table while his wife and kids laugh around him. The theory goes viral in 2014. It gets passed around on Tumblr. It gets written up in articles. It gets debated on every Family Guy subreddit. People start rewatching episodes with the theory in mind, and they start finding more evidence. They start seeing the hospital bed in the background of certain scenes. They start hearing lines that sound different once you know what to listen for. The show gets darker and heavier with every rewatch. Then, in 2022, someone makes a TikTok about the theory. The TikTok gets millions of views. A whole new generation discovers the theory. It spreads again. Kids who had never watched Family Guy start watching it to see if the theory is true. The theory becomes, briefly, one of the most discussed fan theories on the internet. Seth MacFarlane has never addressed it. The writers have never addressed it. Family Guy has continued to make episodes that have nothing to do with this theory, as if the theory does not exist. They keep making chicken fight episodes and Star Wars parodies and holiday specials. Life goes on. The cartoon keeps running. But the theory will not go away, because the theory explains too much. It explains why Meg gets treated the way she gets treated. It explains why Stewie wants to kill Lois. It explains why Brian is smarter than everyone else. It explains why Cleveland left and came back. It explains why the cutaway format exists. It explains why nothing matters. It explains why the show is so cruel. It explains every single strange thing about Family Guy, and it explains them all at once, which is what good theories do. They do not have to be true, they just have to fit. What fans have noticed over the years is that the show itself seems to play with the idea sometimes. A few episodes contain moments that feel, to theory believers, like quiet confirmations. A shot of Peter in a hospital, a line from another character that sounds like a clue, a dream sequence that maybe is not a dream sequence. The writers have never said anything. They may not even know the theory exists, or they may know and be laughing about it. Either way, the show has never closed the door on the reading, which means the reading stays alive, and the fans keep finding evidence. Every season gives them something new. Every episode gets mined for clues. The theory has become its own little universe inside the Family Guy fandom, passed down from one generation of fans to the next, never disproven, never confirmed, just sitting there in the background, daring people to watch the show once more with new eyes. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. 3 episodes after Family Guy brought Brian back from the dead, the show never really recovered from what it had just done. But the night Brian died, something happened that had never happened in the history of adult animation. A petition sprang up within hours. Social media exploded. Fans made a move the writers had not prepared for at all. And the decision the show was forced to make in response is one of the only times in television history that a fan campaign has directly changed a major character's fate. Section 6. The day they actually killed Brian. On the night of November 24th, 2013, an episode of Family Guy aired that changed the show in a way nobody expected. The episode was called Life of Brian. It was the 6th episode of the 12th season, and by the time the credits rolled, Brian Griffin was dead. Not a fake death, not a dream sequence, not a cutaway gag where Brian gets hit by a truck and then comes back fine in the next scene. A real, on-screen, in-canon, actual death. The kind of death a show like Family Guy had never given one of its main characters before. The episode itself is short and brutal. Brian and Stewie are in the front yard of the Griffin house, setting up a street hockey net. They have just finished using Stewie's time machine to have an adventure, and Stewie has destroyed the time machine because he is tired of things going wrong every time they use it. The scene looks normal. The tone is light. Brian and Stewie are doing what Brian and Stewie always do, which is hang out and talk. Then Stewie goes inside to get his knee pads. While Stewie is gone, a car comes speeding around the corner. The driver is drunk. The car is going too fast. It hits Brian head on and keeps going, leaving Brian crumpled on the street. Stewie comes running back out when he hears the crash. He finds Brian lying in the road, bleeding badly, barely able to speak. The rest of the family rushes out. They put Brian in the car and drive him to the animal hospital. The veterinarian comes out to talk to them and delivers the news. Brian's injuries are too severe. There is nothing the vet can do. The family gathers around Brian on the table. Brian, struggling to breathe, looks at each of them. He thanks them for being his family. He tells them he has had a good life. He says to all of them, "I love you all." Then he dies. The scene is played completely straight. No jokes, no cutaways, no punchline at the end. The music goes quiet. The family cries. Peter, who Brian has been best friends with for 14 years of the show, holds the body of his dead dog and weeps. The camera lingers. There is nothing funny about any of it. The show then cuts to the funeral. The family stands at a small grave in a pet cemetery. They say goodbye. They go home to an empty house. And the rest of the episode, the actual plot of the episode, is the family trying to figure out how to move forward without the character who had been at the center of the show for 216 episodes. They adopt a new dog named Vinny. Vinny is voiced by Tony Sirico, the real-life actor best known for playing Paulie Walnuts on The Sopranos. Vinny is Italian-American. He is loud. He is cheerful. He is not Brian. The rest of the family tries to welcome him. Stewie, who is closer to Brian than anyone, cannot accept the replacement. The episode ends with Stewie grieving alone in his room, Vinny coming coming in to comfort him, and the two of them beginning slowly to bond. Fade to black. End of episode. And then the internet exploded. Within hours of the episode airing, a petition appeared on the website change.org. The petition was simple. It asked Seth MacFarlane and Fox Broadcasting to bring Brian back to the show. The petition read, "Brian Griffin was an important part of our viewing experience. He added a witty and sophisticated element to the show. Family Guy and Fox Broadcasting will lose viewers if Brian Griffin is not brought back to the show." The petition hit thousands of signatures in the first few hours. It hit tens of thousands by the next morning. Within days, it had over 130,000 signatures. It became one of the fastest growing entertainment petitions in the history of change.org. Celebrity news sites covered it, late night hosts joked about it, the Family Guy Twitter account got flooded with angry messages. Seth MacFarlane's personal Twitter account got flooded. Producers and writers got personally attacked online for weeks. Some fans threatened to boycott the show entirely. Some fans got Brian Griffin memorial tattoos, including the phrase R.I.P. Brian. Other fans posted videos of themselves crying while watching the death scene. The response was bigger than anyone at the show had prepared for. Steve Callahan, one of the main producers of Family Guy, went on record with the entertainment magazine E! Online a few days after the episode aired. He said, "This was an idea that got pitched in the writer's room, and it sort of caught fire, and we thought it could be a fun way to shake things up. As soon as this idea came up, we started talking about what the next couple episodes could be, and we got very excited about the way this change will affect the family dynamics and the characters." He said they had not expected the reaction to be this intense. He said the writers were surprised at how much people cared. He said they thought viewers would be sad for a few days and then get interested in the new dog. Seth MacFarlane was more direct when he addressed it later. He said, "We were all very surprised, in a good way, that people still cared enough about that character to be that angry." He said the rage was not something the writers had counted on. In other words, they thought they were doing a cool creative move that would shake up the show. The audience treated it like they had killed a real person. Here is what makes the whole thing so strange. According to the writers, the original plan was for Brian to stay dead. Callahan said so in interviews. MacFarlane said so in interviews. The show had started planning future episodes with Vinny as the new family dog. Tony Sirico had been signed on. Vinny was supposed to be a real, permanent replacement. The writers believed that the show would be better with a new character. They believed that Brian had run his course. They believed that the audience would eventually come around and accept the change. The audience did not come around. The audience got angrier every week. 2 episodes after Life of Brian aired, a new episode called Into Harmony's Way went on the air. It had no Brian in it. It had Vinny. The ratings dropped. The anger grew. The internet kept demanding Brian back. The 3rd episode after the death aired on December 15th, 2013. It was called Christmas Guy. It is one of the most famous episodes in the show's entire run, not because of what happened in it, but because of what it undid. In Christmas Guy, Stewie is still grieving Brian. He is miserable. He is wandering around Quahog the week before Christmas, trying to feel something, and he runs into a past version of himself at a shopping mall. The past version is from earlier in the series, before Stewie destroyed his time machine. The past version still has his time-traveling backpack. Stewie sees the backpack and realizes what he has to do. He steals the backpack from his past self. He uses it to travel back in time to the moment Brian got hit by the car. He stops it from happening. He pulls Brian out of the way. The drunk driver misses. Brian lives. Brian comes home with Stewie. The family, who never knew in this new timeline that he had died, greets him normally. Stewie hugs him. Brian, confused for a second about why Stewie is hugging him so hard, hugs him back. Christmas is saved. Brian is back. Vinny has never existed in this new timeline. The episode ends. Brian has been dead for 21 days of real time and 3 episodes of Showtime. Fans cheered. The petition closed. The Change.org campaign was declared a victory, and an entire television audience felt, for the first time, that they had actually changed the story of a show they watched. They had shouted, and the show had listened. The writers had been forced to undo their own decision. What the writers actually said about the reversal, though, is more complicated. MacFarlane has gone back and forth in different interviews about whether the reversal was planned from the start or whether it was forced by the fan backlash. In some interviews, he says they always intended to bring Brian back, that the 3-episode death was designed as a gut punch from the beginning, that Vinny was never meant to be permanent. In other interviews, he says they genuinely considered making it stick, that the original pitch was for Brian to stay dead, that the backlash influenced the decision. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. 3 episodes is a very short death. If the writers had really planned to make it permanent, Brian would have stayed dead for a season at minimum. Shows that kill off main characters for real tend to leave them dead for a long time, sometimes forever. 3 episodes episodes is not a commitment. 3 episodes is a test. The writers were probably testing to see how much the audience cared. The audience cared more than they expected, so the reversal came sooner than they had originally planned. There is another layer to this that most fans do not know. When Life of Brian aired, the ratings for that single episode were the highest Family Guy had gotten in over a year. The episode was watched by 4.58 million people on its first airing. It beat out every other show on Fox's animation domination block that night. It beat out American Dad, it beat out The Simpsons. Everyone had tuned in, because everyone had heard Brian was going to die. Killing Brian was, whatever else it was, a very effective ratings move. But the ratings bump only lasted for that one episode. The episodes that followed, the ones without Brian, did not get the same numbers. The audience came for the death. They did not stick around for the replacement, which meant the writers had a problem. Killing Brian had worked as a stunt. Keeping Brian dead was hurting the show, so they brought him back, and the show never tried anything that big again. There is one more strange piece to this. In the episode where Brian returns, Christmas Guy, there is no explanation for how the audience is supposed to feel about the original death. The death is just erased, undone, written out of the show's canon. The Brian who died is gone from the timeline. The Brian who came back never died in the first place. All the grief the characters felt, all the funeral scenes, all the crying, all the Vinny episodes never happened in the new version of reality. The show continues as if none of it had ever occurred, except the audience remembers. The audience will always remember. Because for 21 days in November and December of 2013, one of the most popular characters in animation history was really, truly, on paper, dead. And an entire fan base had to sit with the fact that their favorite show had taken someone they loved away from them, without warning, with no plan to give them back. That memory does not go away. Even now, over a decade later, Life of Brian is listed in almost every ranking of the saddest cartoon episodes ever made. It is brought up in articles about fan petitions. It is used as an example of what happens when a show pushes too far and the audience pushes back harder. Seth MacFarlane eventually started making a particular kind of joke in interviews about the whole incident. He would say, "We killed Brian once, and we won't do it again." He would laugh when he said it. The implication was clear. The writers had learned their lesson. Nobody kills a Griffin again. The audience would not allow it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. A different moment in the show's history, from 8 years earlier, has made fans wonder whether the writers have actually been watching things happen before they happen. There is a scene in a season 4 episode from 2005 where baby Stewie is running through a shopping mall screaming for help, and the name he screams, the name of the person he claims he has just escaped from, belongs to a real Hollywood star. A star who would not be publicly accused of anything for another 12 years. And when that accusation finally came, fans pulled up that old scene and stared at it, and asked the only question that made any sense. How did they know? Section 7. The Kevin Spacey Joke. From 2005. In the spring of 2005, Family Guy was in the middle of its 4th season. The show had come back from cancellation just a few months earlier, and the writers were working at full speed, putting out new episodes every week for a fan base that had grown huge during the years the show was off the air. One of the episodes they wrote that season was called Don't Make Me Over. It aired on Fox in May 2005. The plot of the episode is simple and a little silly. Meg Griffin, tired of being the ugly one in the family, gets a makeover. She becomes briefly popular. The family forms a band. They start touring. Things go wrong. Standard Family Guy stuff. In the middle of the episode, the family is walking around a shopping mall. Brian and Stewie get separated from the rest. Stewie is bored. Brian, trying to entertain him, dares him to do something embarrassing for money. He offers Stewie a few dollars if he will take off all his clothes and run through the mall naked. Stewie agrees. He strips down. He starts running. As he runs through the shopping mall, naked, screaming at the top of his lungs, he is yelling a specific line. He is yelling for help. And the help he is asking for, the story he is telling the shoppers who see him, is very specific. He screams, "Help, I have just escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement. Help me." The line lasts a few seconds. The joke is that Stewie is making up the worst thing he can think of to say, and the name that pops into his head is Kevin Spacey's. The cutaway ends. The episode moves on. Stewie goes home. The plot continues. Nobody watching in 2005 thought anything of it. It was just another throwaway Family Guy gag. Dark, random, edgy for the sake of edgy. The kind of thing the show did every week. In 2005, Kevin Spacey was one of the biggest movie stars in the world. He had won 2 Oscars, one for a movie called The Usual Suspects in 1995, and one for a movie called called American Beauty in 1999. He was respected. He was famous. He was the kind of A-list actor who got invited to host award shows. A few years later, he would go on to star in a huge Netflix drama called House of Cards, where he played the President of the United States. There was no public rumor about Kevin Spacey being a child predator in 2005. There was no news story. There was no tabloid article. There was no open secret in the mainstream press. If the Family Guy writers had some kind of inside information, they have never said so. Then 2017 happened. In October of that year, an actor named Anthony Rapp gave an interview to the news website BuzzFeed. In the interview, Rapp said that when he was 14 years old in 1986, he had been at a party in New York City. At that party, a 26-year-old Kevin Spacey had made a sexual advance on him. Rapp said he had been carrying the memory around for over 30 years, and that he had decided to speak publicly because of the larger Me Too movement that was happening at the time, where many women had started coming forward about sexual misconduct in Hollywood. Within days, more people came forward. 8 workers on House of Cards told the news outlet that Spacey had been creating a toxic sexual environment on the set. Actors from other productions came forward with similar stories. A former employee of the Old Vic Theatre in London, where Spacey had been the artistic director, accused him of inappropriate behavior. More and more men, many of whom had been teenagers at the time of the alleged incidents, started telling their stories. Spacey's career ended almost overnight. Netflix fired him from House of Cards. He was removed from a movie called All the Money in the World that had already finished filming, with director Ridley Scott reshooting every scene with a different actor. He was essentially blacklisted from Hollywood. And almost immediately, somebody on the internet remembered the Family Guy joke from 2005. The clip spread fast. It got shared on Twitter. It got turned into a video. People watched it over and over. A cartoon baby, 12 years earlier, screaming about escaping from Kevin Spacey's basement on a major network during prime time, when Spacey was still at the top of his career. The question everyone asked was the same. How did they know? This was not the first time fans had asked that question about Family Guy. The show has a long history of making jokes that seem to predict things that actually happened later. Fans have put together whole lists of these moments over the years. In a 2009 episode called We Love You, Conrad, there was a joke about Bruce Jenner, the Olympic athlete who had been famous for decades as a symbol of strong American masculinity. The joke hinted that Jenner would one day transition and become a woman. 6 years later, in 2015, Bruce Jenner publicly came out as a trans woman named Caitlyn Jenner. People pulled up the old Family Guy clip. In a 2013 episode called Turban Cowboy, which aired on March 17th of that year, there was a scene where Peter Griffin won the Boston Marathon by running over the other runners with his car. In a later part of the same episode, Peter accidentally joined what turned out to be a terrorist group. The episode aired on a Sunday night. Less than a month later, on April 15th, 2013, 2 bombs went off near the finish line of the real Boston Marathon, killing 3 people and injuring hundreds. The terrorists were 2 brothers who had become radicalized online. Family Guy pulled the Turban Cowboy episode from reruns for a while. Fox released a statement saying the timing was a terrible coincidence. Seth MacFarlane addressed it on Twitter, calling the connection a tasteless assumption. In an older episode, Peter Griffin runs for a political office and at one point says he wants to become president. Fans have connected this, loosely, to cutaway gags where Donald Trump is mentioned as being involved in American politics years before he actually ran. Family Guy joked about Trump being president in episodes from the 2000s. Trump actually became president in 2017. A 2005 episode had a joke where Peter mentions a woman having a sex change. A 2007 episode contained a joke about a Supreme Court justice dying in a way that mirrored, very loosely, the 2016 death of Justice Antonin Scalia. Different episodes contained jokes about celebrities, public figures, and world events that later came true in some form. Fans have cataloged dozens of these on websites and YouTube videos. Seth MacFarlane has spoken about the predictions thing exactly once at any real length. It was at the 2018 Television Critics Association press tour, which is an event where TV executives and producers talk to journalists about their shows. A reporter asked him about the Kevin Spacey joke. MacFarlane said, "I think the myth that Family Guy is this Kreskin-like prognosticator of this kind of stuff is a little sensationalized. He used the name Kreskin, who was a famous stage performer who claimed to be able to read minds and predict the future. MacFarlane was saying that people were treating Family Guy like a magical fortune teller when it was not one. He added, "It's interesting that the idea that Family Guy is this cartoon Ouija board that predicts these things." What MacFarlane was saying, in plain language, was that the writers do not have any special inside knowledge. They do not have a crystal ball. all. They make a lot of jokes every year. Some of those jokes happen to line up with things that happen later. When you make thousands of jokes over decades, some of them will accidentally hit on things that come true. Most of them will not. People only remember the hits. This is actually a real thing in math. There's an idea that if you make enough predictions, some of them will come true by pure chance, and people will remember only the ones that came true, while forgetting the thousands that did not. Family Guy has been on the air since 1999. It has produced over 450 episodes. Each episode contains dozens of cutaway jokes. The total number of random jokes the show has made over the years is probably in the hundreds of thousands. Out of hundreds of thousands of jokes, a handful are going to accidentally match something that happens in the real world later. That is not magic. That is just numbers. McFarlane's point makes sense, mostly, but the Kevin Spacey joke is the one that is hardest to explain that way. The joke is very specific. The choice to pick Kevin Spacey out of every possible celebrity the writers could have picked for a joke about a child being held captive in a basement is a specific choice. Random joke generation does not usually produce that level of specificity. That joke had to come from somewhere in the writer's room. Someone decided to write Kevin Spacey's name in that line. Someone decided to leave it in during rewrites. Someone decided to keep it when the episode was being recorded. Seth MacFarlane has said repeatedly that the writers had no inside knowledge. He has said the joke was written completely at random. He has said it was one of thousands of dark jokes the show has made, and it just happens to have aged in a strange way. That might be true. The writer's room at Family Guy is made up of comedy writers, not investigators. They are not sitting around with secret files on Hollywood predators. They are sitting around a conference room trying to make each other laugh. The joke is the joke. They probably picked Kevin Spacey because his name fit the rhythm of the sentence, or because somebody in the room thought it was funny, or because he was a famous enough name that audiences would recognize it. But there is another possibility, and it is worth saying out loud, even if it is impossible to prove. Hollywood is a small industry. Writers in Hollywood talk to people. People talk to people. Rumors travel. There have been reports after Spacey's career ended that people in the industry had been talking privately about his behavior for years. Some of those conversations might have reached writers' rooms, not as confirmed facts, but as whispers, as industry gossip, as the kind of thing that people mention at dinner parties but would never put in a news article. A comedy writer might hear something, file it away, and then reach for the name when they needed a creepy reference for a joke. The writer might not even remember, consciously, where the association came from. They just know that this famous man's name is the right name for this creepy bit. There is no way to prove whether any of this happened. The writers who worked on Don't Make Me Over in 2005 have never gone on the record about where the Kevin Spacey line came from. Maybe it was random. Maybe someone had heard something. We will probably never know. What is certain is that the clip is out there. It exists. It aired on Fox in 2005, and it resurfaced in 2017. And nothing anybody says can change the fact that a cartoon baby was screaming a warning about Kevin Spacey 12 years before anyone in the mainstream press said it out loud. Whatever the explanation is, that moment happened. It is on tape. It will be on tape forever. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The Kevin Spacey joke is the one people remember, but it is far from the only moment in the show's history where something got written that would only make sense years later. The biggest example of this, the one that reshaped the entire show's canon and spawned a whole fan theory of its own, happened in 2005. The show came back from cancellation, and the writers did something to the tone, the characters, and the rules of the world that fans still argue about today. Some of them believe that when Family Guy returned, it was no longer the same show at all. It was a different version of reality, in a different universe, with different versions of the Griffins, and the old show had died with the first cancellation. Section 8. The post-cancellation universe theory. Anyone who has watched Family Guy from the beginning knows that the show changed after it came back in 2005. Not in a small way. Not in the way any long-running show changes as the years go by. In a big, sudden, visible way. The tone got darker. The jokes got meaner. The characters got crueler. The stories got weirder. The rules of the world stopped making sense. Fans have been arguing about this shift for 20 years. Some people say the show got better. Some people say it got worse. But everyone agrees that something changed. And one Reddit user, a few years back, came up with an explanation that nobody has been able to shake since. The theory is called the two universes theory. The user who first posted it went by the name Ho-Ho Swacky Quest. The post is still out there. It has been shared thousands of times. And what it proposes is so strange and so clean that watching Family Guy with the theory in mind turns the show into something much bigger than a cartoon. The theory says this: Family Guy is not one show. Family Guy is two shows. shows. The first 3 seasons, which aired from 1999 to 2002 before the cancellation, took place in one universe. Everything that has aired since the 2005 revival takes place in a completely different universe. 2 separate timelines, 2 separate worlds, 2 separate versions of the Griffin family. The Griffins you see on screen today are not the same Griffins who were on the air before the cancellation. They look similar, they have the same names, they live in the same house, but they are different people. They come from a different reality. The theory sounds wild until you start looking at the evidence, and the evidence is there, a lot of it, laid out in the show itself, hidden in plain sight. Start with the characters. Meg Griffin in the first 3 seasons was a normal teenage girl. Her parents were proud of her, Peter treated her with affection, Lois defended her, the whole family was, by Family Guy standards, functional. There were jokes about Meg being awkward, but there were not jokes about everyone hating her. Her family did not insult her constantly. She did not get trash cans dumped on her head. She was not called the ugliest person in Quahog. She was, in the first 3 seasons, just a character. Post-cancellation, Meg is a completely different person. She is abused. She is insulted daily. She is told by her own father that he wishes she was never born. She is beaten up. She is farted on. She is ignored. Her family does not love her. Her family barely tolerates her. Something changed when the show came back. According to the theory, that something is that the post-cancellation Meg is not the same Meg. Same thing with Peter. Peter in the first 3 seasons was a dumb but loving husband and father. He was silly, he was naive, he made mistakes, but he cared about his family. He would apologize when he hurt them. He would learn lessons. He had a conscience. His stupidity was the joke, and the joke was gentle. Post-cancellation Peter is a monster. He hurts his family on purpose. He insults his wife. He abuses his daughter. He ignores his son. He gets into chicken fights that destroy entire city blocks and never apologizes. He never learns anything. He has no conscience. His stupidity is no longer the joke. His cruelty is. Something happened to this character between season 3 and season 4. Brian is the same way. Pre-cancellation Brian was a calm, wise, smart friend to the family. He drank a little, but he was not an alcoholic. He wrote, but he did not constantly whine about his unpublished novels. He had opinions, but he did not lecture the family about them. He was friendly. He was the voice of reason. Post-cancellation Brian is a different animal. He is a hopeless alcoholic. He sleeps with women who hate him. He writes terrible books that get mocked by everyone who reads them. He lectures everyone constantly about politics. He is pretentious. He is self-righteous. He is annoying on purpose. Many fans who started watching the show after 2005 actively dislike Brian. Many fans who started watching before 2005 remember him as their favorite character. Those are 2 different Brians. Stewie is maybe the most obvious example of all. Pre-cancellation Stewie was a supervillain. He wanted to kill Lois. He wanted to take over the world. He built laser weapons. He spoke like an evil scientist. Every episode was about his attempts to do something terrible. He was the Stewie everybody remembers from the early promotional material. The Stewie on the t-shirts. The Stewie saying his famous lines about Lois and matricide. Post-cancellation Stewie is still a baby genius, but his personality has shifted completely. He barely tries to kill Lois anymore. He spends most of his time hanging out with Brian. He travels through time for fun. He goes on adventures. He builds time machines and teleporters. He makes references to Broadway musicals. He is the character we talked about in an earlier section, the one the writers had been secretly writing as gay since season 2. That Stewie is not the same Stewie who was trying to murder his mother for 3 seasons. That Stewie is a different version of the character. The theory says this is because they are different versions. 2 parallel universes. 2 different Stewies. The cancellation split the timeline. But the theory gets even more interesting when you look at the actual episodes the show has produced, because Family Guy has, multiple times, openly stated that parallel universes exist in its world. In season 8, episode 1, which aired in September 2009, there is an episode called Road to the Multiverse. The premise is that Stewie has invented a device that lets him travel between parallel universes. He takes Brian with him. They visit one alternate reality after another, a universe where Christianity never existed, a universe where dogs are the dominant species and humans are pets, a universe where everything is drawn in the style of Disney's old cartoons, a universe where Japan won World War II, a universe where the animation is made up of low-resolution blocks, a universe where everyone is the opposite gender. The episode is one of the most popular in the entire show. It won a Primetime Emmy Award. It confirmed in official Family Guy canon that the multiverse exists. Other universes are real. Stewie can travel between them. There are infinite versions of the Griffin family in infinite other timelines, all running in parallel to the one we watch every week. Which means, according to the theory, that the post-cancellation Griffins might not be from the same timeline as the pre-cancellation Griffins at all. The multiverse was always there. The show just never mentioned it during the first 3 seasons. When the show came back in 2005, it was actually showing us a different universe's version of the Griffins. And fans never noticed because the characters looked the same. Then comes the biggest piece of evidence. Season 10, Episode 5, Back to the Pilot, which aired in November 2011. This episode is the one most fans cite when they want to prove the two universes theory. In this episode, Brian is thinking about an old tennis ball he buried years ago. He asks Stewie to help him find it. Stewie uses his time machine to go back to the exact date Brian buried the ball. The date is January 31st, 1999. That is the actual day the first episode of Family Guy aired on Fox, the day of the pilot. Brian and Stewie arrive in the past. They are inside the events of the pilot episode. They are watching themselves as their past selves, and what they see is weird. Meg's voice is different. She sounds like Lacey Chabert because she is being played by Lacey Chabert in these old scenes. Stewie points this out. He says she sounds like someone about to give up a huge opportunity. A joke about Chabert quitting the show. The animation style is different. The show uses the original, rough, cheap animation from 1999 for the past scenes. The characters look slightly different. Their movements are stiffer. The colors are flatter. The Film Roman studio animated those first 3 seasons, and the style of that studio is clearly visible. The current Family Guy animation, which is done by different studios with newer equipment, looks completely different. The past looks like a different show. The ratio of the screen is different. The old scenes are in 4:3 ratio, like an old TV. The new scenes are in widescreen, 16:9. The past is literally a different shape than the present. Peter drives past things that do not exist anymore. Chris barely speaks because Chris in the original pilot barely spoke. Characters from the early show who were written out later are visible in the background. Peter had a different group of friends in the pilot, guys who were at his stag party, who never appeared on the show again after the first episode. Stewie and Brian meet them in the past. Then Stewie returns to the present, and the writers have the new present-day Peter call those friends and invite them over, as a joke about how they were dropped from the show for no reason. The two time periods feel different. They look different. They sound different. They are animated differently. They have different characters in them. The two versions of Family Guy are shown side by side in the same episode, and the show itself is drawing your attention to how different they are. Brian, during the time travel, makes a mistake. He warns his past self about the September 11th attacks, which have not happened yet in 1999. When Stewie and Brian return to the present, the world has changed completely. Brian preventing 9/11 caused a chain reaction. George W. Bush lost the 2004 election because there was no Iraq war for him to campaign on. America fell into a second civil war. 17 million people died. The present day is a wasteland. Stewie and Brian have to go back in time again to undo what they did. They confront their past selves. They force their past selves to not prevent 9/11. The timeline resets. The present returns to normal. That episode was written by Mark Hinteman. It aired on September 11th, 2011, exactly 10 years after the day Seth MacFarlane missed Flight 11. The same Seth MacFarlane who, according to his own interviews, felt guilty for years about surviving. The episode where Brian tries to stop 9/11 from happening and fails aired on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. The writer of the episode was the writer. The voice of Brian was the man who should have been dead. Fans have pulled apart this episode for years, because what the episode is really doing, whether the writers intended it or not, is showing the difference between the two eras of the show. The past is in one universe. The present is in another. Brian and Stewie walk between them, and they are not the only people who do. The fan theory has a final layer. It says that when Brian and Stewie traveled to the pilot in Back to the Pilot, they did not actually time travel. They did what they did in Road to the Multiverse. They universe hopped. The past they visited was not the past of their own timeline. It was a separate, parallel universe, which happened to look like their past because it was running a few years behind. They visited the first timeline, the timeline that got canceled, and they came back to the second timeline, the one where the show still runs, the one where the characters are meaner and the jokes are darker and Meg gets abused and Brian is a drunk. According to the theory, everything that has aired since 2005 has been happening in a universe the original 1999 Griffins never lived in. The first Griffins died when Fox canceled their show in 2002. These Griffins, the ones on television right now, are from a different reality. This is the kind of theory that cannot be proven. Seth MacFarlane has never commented on it. The writers have never commented on it. It is fan reading, not official canon. But it explains, cleanly, every single weird change that happened when the show came back. Every tone shift, every personality flip, every weird continuity error, every moment where old Family Guy and new Family Guy feel like two different programs stitched together. Some theories about Family Guy are dark. This one is big. It takes the whole show apart and rebuilds it as a story about parallel worlds. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And while the fans were busy putting the universes together, the writers were putting together something much smaller and much stranger inside the show. A character who started out as a joke one guy made up in a room. A character who was not supposed to become famous. A character who got turned by a single pitch into the most disturbing running gag in the history of primetime animation. And the voice actor who made him up has gone on the record about exactly how it happened. Section 9. Herbert was never supposed to be a problematic character. Herbert is, by almost every measure, the most disturbing recurring character in the history of primetime animation. He is an old man. He lives alone in a small house a few doors down from the Griffins on Spooner Street. He walks with a metal frame. He has a thin, whispery voice that drags out the ends of his words. He has a dog named Jesse. He has a pool in his backyard. He has a basement. He has a constant, unblinking interest in Chris Griffin, the teenage son of Peter and Lois. Every scene Herbert is in the whole 26-year history of Family Guy, contains some version of the same joke. Herbert says something sweet-sounding to Chris. The dialogue is gentle. His voice is soft. He offers Chris popsicles. He offers to let him mow the lawn. He offers him rides home. He invites him over to see his train set. And underneath every single word Herbert says is the same unspoken intent. Herbert's behavior toward Chris is deeply inappropriate. The entire character is that joke, over and over for 2 decades on a major network in prime time on Fox. The joke has been controversial for years. Plenty of articles have been written about how disturbing it is. Plenty of fans have defended it as satire. Plenty of fans have argued it goes too far. Child abuse survivors have written personal essays about how hard Herbert is to watch. The character has his own defenders and his own critics. The debate has been going on basically since Herbert first appeared in the show. What almost nobody knows is that Herbert was never supposed to be any of this. Herbert was an accident, a random voice a writer tried out one day in a room, a one-off character who was supposed to appear for 30 seconds and then disappear. The fact that he became the show's most famous, disturbing running gag happened because of a single line somebody tossed off in a writer's meeting, which someone else laughed at, which somehow survived into the final episode, which then caught on with audiences, which forced the writers to keep using him, which eventually turned him into the character he is today. The voice actor who created Herbert is named Mike Henry. He has been with Family Guy from the very beginning. He is not a full-time professional voice actor in the way that Seth MacFarlane is. Henry was actually a writer on the show first. He met MacFarlane in college. They both went to the Rhode Island School of Design together. They became friends. When MacFarlane got his deal with Fox to make Family Guy, he brought Henry along as one of the early staff writers. Henry has said in interviews that he spent most of his time in the first year trying to make MacFarlane laugh. That was his job. Sit in the writer's room and try to crack up the boss. One of the ways Henry would crack MacFarlane up was with voices. Henry, it turned out, was very good at voices. He had grown up in Virginia. He had spent his childhood listening to old Southern men talk. He could do a dozen different versions of old Southern men from his memory, each one slightly different, each one based on a real person he remembered. He would walk into the writer's room and try out new voices on MacFarlane, and MacFarlane would laugh, and sometimes Henry would end up voicing a small character in an episode. Herbert started as one of those voices. Henry has explained the origin in a 2012 interview. He said, "Herbert, the old man who likes Chris, was just a character who began because I imitated these old men back in Virginia all the time. I just made them dirty old men and not necessarily pedophiles. But I pitched one joke in the writer's room about how he has a crush on Chris, and that's what catches on. So now that character is a pedophile." That quote is Henry's own words. He is saying very plainly that he did not invent Herbert as a pedophile. He invented an old man voice. The old man was based on a particular kind of man Henry had known growing up. The old man was a little creepy, a little handsy, the way some old men from small towns can be, but he was not designed to be a child predator. He was going to be just another weird background character in the Family Guy universe. Then, in one writer's meeting, Henry pitched a specific joke. He pitched the idea that Herbert had a crush on Chris Griffin. The joke was that this old man, who in Henry's original version was just a little off, had a specific teenage boy he had his eye on. The joke got a laugh in the room. The joke got written into an episode. The joke got animated. The joke got aired. And it caught on. Audiences loved Herbert. They quoted his lines. They made GIFs of him. They shared clips of his scenes. The character exploded in popularity. And because the audience loved the joke, the writers kept writing the joke. Every time Herbert showed up in an episode, he got another Chris scene, another popsicle offer, another creepy compliment, another whispered line that meant something much worse than what it sounded like on the surface. What Henry had invented as a one-off gag turned into a full character arc. Herbert got his own backstory. He got his own episodes. He got a dog. He got a house. He got his whole life filled in, all around the central joke of him being a predator. The writers kept topping themselves. Each episode tried to find a new way to make the joke work. Each episode pushed the bit a little further. By the time the show was 10 seasons in, Herbert was one of the most famous side characters on the entire show, and Mike Henry had become the voice of a character that represented the darkest thing Family Guy was willing to make fun of. In that same 2012 interview, Henry described his relationship with the show in a way that explained exactly how this kept happening. He said, basically, I should have the domain name sethsclown.com, because basically I'm there to make Seth laugh, and I'm a whore. He was making a joke about himself. The joke was that he would do anything, say anything, voice anything, as long as it got a laugh from Seth MacFarlane. If MacFarlane laughed, the joke stayed in. If MacFarlane did not laugh, the joke got cut. That was not just the rule for Herbert. That was the rule for the entire show. A Family Guy writer and producer named Steve Callahan explained this in a separate interview. He said that during a rewrite session, the writers would take an episode that was already close to finished and send 4 or 5 writers off to smaller rooms called gag rooms. In the gag room, the writers would try to come up with 6 or 7 different alternate versions of a single cutaway gag. Then they would come back to the main room and pitch all the alternate versions. Whichever one got the biggest laugh was the one that went into the episode. That is how Family Guy gets made. It is not a show written from a master plan. It is not a show where characters get careful, long-term development. It is a show where people sit in rooms and pitch jokes and keep the ones that land. Everything you see on the show, every character, every running gag, every storyline exists because somebody pitched it in a room and somebody else laughed. If the laugh had not come, the gag would not have stayed in. Which means Herbert is not the only accident. The character of Neil Goldman, the nerdy kid who is obsessed with Meg, is named after a real writer on the Family Guy staff named Neil Goldman. The real Neil Goldman did not pick the name for himself. The other writers in the room did. They picked his name for the nerdy character because they thought, as a joke, that Neil himself was a nerd. The name got into the script. The name got into the episode. The name got into the show forever. A real writer got to watch his own name become the label for the most pathetic teenage boy in Quahog because his coworkers made fun of him in a meeting and the joke stuck. The giant chicken, who has had multiple episode-long fights with Peter over the years, was not planned. He was a one-off cutaway gag. A writer pitched the idea of Peter getting a bad coupon and going crazy about it. Somebody turned the bad coupon giver into a giant chicken. The fight scene was so popular with audiences that the writers kept bringing the chicken back again and again, each time with a longer fight. The chicken now has his own name and his own family and his own ongoing story arc, all because one random pitch in one random meeting got a big enough laugh to survive. The character of Consuela, the Hispanic maid who says no 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 to everyone, was invented by Mike Henry as another one of his voice experiments. She was not designed. She was a sound he made that got a laugh. The sound turned into a name. The name turned into a character. The character turned into a recurring part of the show. Death, the hooded figure who shows up when people die, has been voiced by 2 different famous comedians over the years, including Adam Carolla and the late Norm Macdonald. Neither of them was cast for any deep reason. They were picked because they happened to be friends with the writers and because their voices got laughs. The Griffin family dog Brian was based, as we talked about earlier, on Seth MacFarlane's student film dog Steve. Peter's voice was stolen from a security guard MacFarlane overheard on a college campus. Stewie's voice was based on Rex Harrison, a British actor from the 1960s whose movies MacFarlane happened to like. Every single voice on the show has an accidental origin story. None of them were carefully planned. All of them came from somewhere random, from somebody trying something on a whim, from a laugh in a room. This is the hidden truth about Family Guy. The show has a reputation for being designed with a master plan, for having deep hidden meanings, for being a carefully built machine. Fans write long essays about the symbolism of various characters. Fans build theories about what each character represents. Fans assume that because the show has been running for so long, everything in it must have been planned out years in advance. None of it was. Family Guy has never been planned. Family Guy has always been built the same way it was built in the pilot, which is a bunch of comedy writers sitting in a room and throwing things at the wall to see what gets a laugh. When something gets a laugh, it stays in. When it does not, it goes in the trash. That is the entire creative process. That is how Herbert exists. That is how the giant chicken exists. That is how Consuela exists. That is how Cleveland Brown got a bathtub that always falls out of his house when Peter drives past. There is no plan. There has never been a plan. There is only a room full of people trying to make each other laugh for 2 hours a week, every week, for 26 years. Mike Henry has said in interviews that he sometimes feels uncomfortable about what Herbert has become. He has said that the character has grown into something he did not fully intend. He has said he still does the voice because the show still wants him to, and because audiences still respond, and because his job is to make people laugh. But that there is a part of him that wonders what happened. How a voice he made up to entertain his coworkers turned into a character that millions of people recognize on sight. How a pitch he tossed off in a meeting turned into a permanent part of American television history. How a joke got away from him and became bigger than he ever meant it to be. That is the real story of Family Guy. Not the theories about parallel universes. Not the theories about Peter's hidden grief. Not the predictions, or the canceled episodes, or the banned storylines. The real story is simpler and stranger than any of that. It is that one of the most famous shows of the last quarter century got built by accident, one joke at a time, by people who were mostly just trying to survive their shift at work. And the writers who built it have spent the entire history of the show quietly telling us that truth, in the episodes themselves, in moments nobody noticed, in scenes that confirm out loud what the show really is. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. In one of those moments, hidden at the end of an episode about Stewie trying to talk to the cast of Star Trek, the writers pulled the camera back and showed us something that, if the theory is right, rewrites every frame of the show that came before it and every frame that has come after. Section 10. The show became self-aware. The final piece of the puzzle is the one the show has been telling you about out loud, on screen, in canon, for over 15 years. Most fans never noticed it. The moments are short. They happen inside other stories. They are presented like jokes, but if you stack them together in order, they add up to something that almost rewrites what Family Guy actually is. Start with the 100th episode, Season 6, Episodes 4 and 5, the two-part story called Stewie Kills Lois and Lois Kills Stewie, which aired in November 2007. Fox promoted it for weeks ahead of time. Seth MacFarlane had gone on television saying there would be a major death in the 100th episode. Fans speculated for months, and when the episode finally aired, Stewie did it. He actually did it. He followed Lois onto a cruise ship, cornered her on the deck, pulled out a machine gun, and shot her dead. Her body fell overboard into the ocean. She was gone. The next episode, Lois Kills Stewie, picked up a year later in the show's timeline. Peter was on trial for Lois's murder. He was about to be sentenced to life in prison. And then, Lois walked into the courtroom, alive. She had been rescued at sea, had lost her memory, and had finally remembered who she was. She revealed the truth about Stewie. Stewie ran. Stewie escaped to Washington, D.C., hacked into the government, and made himself president of the world. Lois grabbed an entire arsenal of weapons, kicked down the door to the Oval Office, and confronted her own son. They fought. Stewie won. He was about to kill her. Peter burst in at the last second and shot Stewie in the chest and then in the head. Mother and son, both dead. Peter and Lois holding each other in silence over the body of their baby. And then 4 words appeared on the screen. Simulation over. The camera pulled back. Stewie Griffin was sitting in a strange chair inside his bedroom. He had not killed Lois. He had not taken over the world. Peter had not shot him. None of it had happened. The entire 2-part episode had been a computer program Stewie had been running to see what would happen if he ever actually went through with his plan. Brian walked into the room. He handed Stewie some postcards. Peter and Lois were on vacation. Everything was fine. Fans ever since have called the reveal a cop-out, a way for the writers to tell a massive story without having to deal with the consequences. But read it another way. Take it seriously. What the show is saying in that moment is that the biggest story it has ever told, the story that took 2 episodes and years of build-up, never actually happened. It was a simulation, a fake world inside the mind of the show's most intelligent character, a fantasy with no weight, a ghost. That is the first moment. The second moment came 2 years later, March 2009, Season 7, Episode 11, the episode called Not All Dogs Go to Heaven. Griffin. The plot of the episode is split in two. In the main story, Meg becomes a born-again Christian after getting sick and watching religious television while lying in bed. She tries to convert Brian, who is an atheist. The family turns against Brian. The episode gets into a heated argument about religion and faith, which is why it is one of the most controversial episodes the show ever made. But the smaller story, the one running alongside, is stranger. Stewie has just been at a Star Trek convention. He was furious that the actors who played the Next Generation crew did not answer any of his questions, so he builds a real Star Trek transporter in his bedroom. He uses it to kidnap the entire cast of Star Trek The Next Generation. Patrick Stewart, Jonathan Frakes, Brent Spiner, LeVar Burton, Michael Dorn, Marina Sirtis, Gates McFadden, Will Wheaton, and Denise Crosby all voice themselves in the episode, playing cartoon versions of themselves. Stewie spends a day with them. They go bowling, they go to McDonald's, they go to a carnival. They are, every one of them, deeply annoying. Stewie eventually screams at them and sends them back. Here is what happens at the very end of the episode. After Stewie sends the Star Trek cast home, the camera slowly pulls back from his bedroom, out of the house, up into the sky, farther and farther back. The camera keeps pulling away, and eventually, the entire town of Quahog, the whole world the Griffins live in, is revealed to be inside the molecules of a lampshade. The lampshade is sitting in a bedroom. The bedroom belongs to Adam West, the actor who plays Mayor West on Family Guy, and Rob Lowe, the actor from The West Wing. They are in their pajamas. They are sitting in bed together. They are sharing the lampshade. Adam West says goodnight to Rob Lowe. The lights go out. The end. That is canon. That aired on Fox. The writers put it in the show and moved on as if it was just another cutaway gag. But what the cutaway said, officially, inside the show's own timeline, is this. The Family Guy universe is not a universe. It is microscopic. It exists inside the molecules of a single object in a bedroom shared by two real-life actors. Everything in Quahog, everyone in the Griffin family, every person who has ever been on this show is atoms inside a lamp. That is the second moment. The third moment came in 2016, season 15, episode 4, an episode called Inside Family Guy, which aired in October of that year. The premise of the episode is a behind-the-scenes look at the making of the show. The actor James Woods, who has appeared in Family Guy many times over the years, plays himself as the host of a documentary. He walks the audience through the studio where Family Guy is filmed. He takes the audience into the writer's room. He takes the audience onto the set. The episode presents the Griffins not as characters, but as actors playing characters. And in this version of reality, every actor is completely different from who they play on television. Peter Griffin, in the documentary, is not a fat idiot. He is a smart, refined, sophisticated man. He speaks with perfect grammar. He reads literature. He is tired of being forced to play a stupid character every week and is about to quit the show. Meg Griffin, the character the family has been abusing for years, is actually the most respected actor on the set. Everyone listens to her. Stewie is a grown man who hates having to play a baby. Brian is a Republican straw man who annoys everyone at the office. Quagmire is deeply religious and has never had sex. The cast members hate each other off camera. They are constantly fighting. They openly admit they wish the show was over. Peter eventually walks off and quits in a rage. The episode is presented as fiction inside fiction, a cartoon pretending to be a documentary, a joke. But what it is actually doing, over 22 minutes of airtime, is telling the audience that Family Guy is a fake show inside the show's own universe. The Griffins are actors. The stories are scripts. The cruelty is staged. None of it is real. Even inside the cartoon world, nothing the cartoon does matters, because the cartoon is a cartoon inside the cartoon. That is the third moment. 3 pieces, stacked. All of them canon. 1. The biggest story the show ever told, the 100th episode that killed off 2 main characters, was a simulation, a fantasy inside Stewie's head that never happened. 2. The entire Family Guy universe exists inside the molecules of a lampshade in a shared bedroom. 3. The Griffins themselves are fictional actors playing fictional characters on a fictional show inside the fictional universe of Family Guy. Put those 3 things together, and a question forms that almost no fan has ever asked out loud. If the show has told the audience, directly, in its own canon, that its biggest stories are simulations, that its universe is microscopic, and that its characters are actors in another fiction, then what is the real Family Guy? What part of the show is actually happening? What part is real? Are the characters aware that they are in a show? Are they aware that they are not real? Is Peter Griffin a man dreaming he is a cartoon dreaming he is an actor dreaming he is a cartoon again. The show has been hinting at all of this for 15 years. The writers have left the breadcrumbs in plain sight. The 100th episode, the lampshade, the documentary. 3 massive moments, all in canon, all pointing at the same buried idea. The idea is that Family Guy knows what it is. The show knows that none of it matters. The show knows that none of it is real. The show has told the audience this multiple times, in multiple different ways, and kept going anyway. Every fan theory we have talked about in this video is in some way downstream of these 3 moments. The Peter is going insane theory is about the show being a hallucination. The 2 universes theory is about the show being multiple realities at once. All the fan theories about Stewie, about Meg, about Brian, about the cutaways, about the cruelty, are trying to reach for the same truth. That the show is not what it appears to be. That there is another layer underneath it. That something is happening that the audience is not being told about directly. But the audience was told 3 times, out loud, in canon, on network television. Just between the chicken fights and the musical numbers and the sex jokes, every time the show handed the audience a piece of the puzzle, the audience laughed, and the scene cut away, and the next joke came, and the reveal was buried under 100 cutaway gags. Family Guy has been telling you this secret for 26 years. Nobody was paying attention. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.